What's up, everybody? It's Realistic here, and I'm doing another tutorial for SoundOracle.net. And this week, I'm going to be doing top 5 plugins for mastering. So, obviously, hardware is a really good choice to use when you're mastering, but that's not always the case. Sometimes it's either a financial situation or sometimes you're on the road and you can't master with hardware. So, I made a list of my favorite plugins, software plugins, to use while mastering. And feel free in the comment section below to let me know what your favorite mastering plugins are, or if there's any of these plugins that I mentioned in here and you want to know more about and want me to do a full tutorial on that one, let me know. But anyways, we're gonna dive in, and this is my top 5, not your top 5, but my top 5. All right, let's dive in. Alright, so I got Ableton open up here, and we're going to go into my top 5 plugins for mastering. But before we get into my top 5, and before we get into some honorable mentions here, I do want to point out how I had came up with this list and the criteria that I used to make my top 5. I chose to choose the plugins based on quality and tone rather than the bells and whistles and cool features to it. Now, with that said, there are some plugins in here that do have a lot of options and a lot of features into it. I think you'll see that a lot of the plugins I chose have quite a bit of functionality to it, but that wasn't the only thing that I was focusing on. I was more focused on the tone and the quality that these plugins give your master. So a few of the plugins, they do lack maybe a few extra features to it, but when it comes to the quality and the tone, I personally feel like they are unmatched. And I think that's really important when you're mastering music, is you want to focus on the quality and the tone rather than all the bells and whistles and all the cool little stuff to it, you know. So that's what I used to make my list, and hopefully you can be able to hear the difference with the quality and see that it's usually a good choice to choose quality over all the cool functionalities. I want to do a couple honorable mentions, and my first honorable mention is the SSL bus compressor here. There's a few different versions that you can get. You can get the UAD version, or you can also get the Waves version as well. And you can see too, they have all the same parameters here. Everything's all the same with the setup. This is a great compressor. It's iconic for making stuff sound glue. It's got just a great punch to it. Sounds very modern, very edgy to it. The reason why I had to put it in the honorable mentions and not in my top 5 is there are a couple things that it lacks. I wish that it had a little bit more options for ratios. I wish that the attack and release time weren't notched. And I'm not too big a fan of the metering on here. I do think there's other compressors that have better metering, but this is a great sounding compressor. And if you don't have it, my next honorable mention is going to work just perfect for that, because it's stock plugins, and Ableton actually has a stock plugin that is very similar to the SSL compressor, right down to the same exact numbers and everything matching up. You can see the attack time, same notch numbers. You can see the ratio, same notch numbers. It's basically modeled after this plugin right here. So this is also a great option. But yeah, my other honorable mention is stock plugins. You can get a lot done. You can see right here in Ableton, we got a glue compressor, we got limiters, we got an EQ, all things to get you going. So don't sleep on those. All right. So now let's get into my top 5 plugins for mastering. Number 5 is the Shadow Hills mastering compressor. This has been my go-to for bus compressors when I'm mastering. I love it. I think it has an iconic tone to it. I love that it has 3 different possibilities for compression. So we have an optical, we have a discrete. So the optical would be more forgiving and you can push it a little bit more without it going too crazy. Discrete's going to be a little hardcore, a little punchier. And our third option is you can blend the two together. So I think this one has not only a lot of great options on it, but it also has a lot of great sound to it. It may seem a little intimidating at first because of all the parameters, and the interface itself is based on the hardware, so it looks a little crazy looking, but once you get the flow of it, it's not too bad. We have everything that we need in a compressor. We have attack, release time. So let's give a listen how this sounds.
Slow up, you bro. keep it in neutral. I know you're ready, but it ain't mutual. You know the reasons, you know.
So you can see right there it has a nice warm punch to it, and we also got different options for coloring too, so that's always really nice to have. We have nickel, which is just clean, and then we have something that's a little bit more colorful with the iron, and then we have steel, which is a little bit more of a dirty, aggressive sound. And the last thing that I like about this too is we have two different meters on here, and it's cool because you can choose the two different meters to be separate. So if you want one meter to show the optical compression and the other one to show the discrete compressor, you can do that. You can also switch them to be output. So it's a beautiful sound. The only people that make this one right here is UAD, and you have to have either a UAD interface or a UAD satellite in order to run it, or some type of UAD DSP chip. That's why it hits at number 5 and not higher on my list, because it is limited that you have to have the interface, but it sounds gorgeous, and anything from UAD usually sounds top notch. All right, number 4 on my list is Fabfilter Saturn. This one is great. I think it's one of the best types of saturation and excitement out there. What I really like about this is not only do we have a lot of different options for saturation here, but I like the ability to be able to choose multiple bands, so we can get multi-band saturation on our master channel, which I think is really great. And I'll show you some of the options as far as how useful this is and how versatile it is. So down here I can do something a little bit more warm. And then up here I can get a little bit brighter if I wanted to have something a little cleaner and something with a little bit more presence. And you can see when I change these, it doesn't affect the other bands here. And then I can adjust the level of each band if I want, just to be able to duck down some areas with different frequency bands. You can see when I go in and out too, it definitely brings a lot of excitement to it. A lot of things punched up a little bit, got a little bit more of a knock to it. Things got a little bit brighter, and it also makes things appear wider, because when we're affecting things in the top range, a lot of times we can give the image of things sounding brighter. And also the last thing I'll point out is it allows you to adjust your wet dry individually on different bands, which I think this is nice if you're like, oh, I really like how this sounds on the top end. The low end's perfect. I love the mid range, but the top end, I just want a little bit less. So then you can adjust the band here of wet and dry. Is the brand new Fabfilter Pro-Q 3. If this didn't come out, Pro-Q 2 still would have been able to make my list. But the reason why it does is I think EQing is really, really important for mastering. I think it's one of the necessities for tools when you're mastering. And so this right here is to me, the best EQ for mastering, especially now that they've added a few things. So a few of the things that I really like is the ability to do mid-side EQ. I think mid-side EQ is really important. Like I said, I do have a video on mid-side EQ if you want to know more about that. But it's important to be able to, especially when mastering, be able to EQ things that are coming down the middle differently versus things that are coming down the side, especially when we're talking low end. A lot of times we get a big low end build up in the middle here. So that's something that I really like. I love the ability for, especially mastering, to be able to zero out frequencies. See, I can hear by zeroing it out that there's a huge buildup at 104.
Keep it in neutral. I know you're ready.
And with the new installment of Pro-Q, Pro-Q3 here, they added the ability to have dynamic EQ. And this is one of the most important types of EQing that I do when I'm mastering. I think it's almost a necessity to be able to have this ability to do dynamic EQ. And so think about it as if a multi-band compressor and an EQ were combining together. And that's what a dynamic EQ does, is it allows you to compress down certain frequencies. So you can see that when things build up a little too much right here, we're starting to see the EQ slap down a little bit. Another thing that I really like about this EQ is you can have up to 24 bands. It's really easy to use, and you can just keep making the bands all together. You can highlight things and change them all together if you want. You can highlight things and delete them. There's a lot of things about this EQ that makes it really easy too. If you're just trying to do shelving, it's very intuitive and smart, so it knows that when you're in the middle that you probably want a bell, but if you're over at the edge that you probably want some type of shelving right here. It also knows that if you just double click that you probably want a filter, so it's very intelligent that way. It just makes it even more useful. Another thing too that's really nice is it gives you the ability to switch from zero latency to linear phase. And when you're mastering, you want to be able to use linear phase. Usually when you're mixing, you want to use zero latency just because it's easier on your CPU. But when you're mastering, linear phase stays a lot truer to your transients and is a lot more smoother when it comes to a lot of different dynamic changes and stuff like that. So I actually did a full review on Fabfilters Pro-Q3. So if you're interested in that, check that out. But this EQ is so versatile. There's so many options to it. I can just continuously just affect things differently too. Not only can I do mid and side, but I can also EQ the stereo field differently, and then also EQ the left and right channels differently if I need to. Goes to Fabfilters Pro L2. This one was hard. I almost put Fabfilters Pro-Q3 in there, but I decided to go with the limiter because limiting is almost synonymous with mastering. I put this one in here because it has a lot of options to it, and they went from Pro L to Pro L2 recently, and just like with the EQ, they made it better, and I was really impressed with this. The thing that I was most impressed with was they added a Lufs meter in here. You can see this right here, Lufs down here. This is really important for making sure things are loud enough or making sure things aren't too loud. A lot of times people will make things too loud, and it's because they're going past the recommended amount of Lufs. So generally the rules are, and you can see too, it can set some metering too, so you can see it. It will go in red when we get too loud to the point of when it goes past. So with streaming, you usually want to try to get to around -15 to -14 Lufs. And then with CD or SoundCloud, you usually want to get to -9 Lufs. If you're just doing SoundCloud, I would stick there. -8 Lufs is the loudest that I would go with that, but that's really, really handy. This is one of the few limiters on the market that actually has a built-in Lufs meter, and that's one of the reasons why it has to go high on my list. The other reason is because of this gorgeous interface. I think Fabfilter does a phenomenal job on making things look gorgeous, making things look easy on the eyes, and also really simple and easy to use. You can see we got a lot of different types of possibilities here. We have transparent style of limiting. We have punchy, aggressive, modern, bus, safe. Usually I go with transparent just because I'm playing it just a little bit safe as far as the coloring goes. I like too that our attack and our release is not notched right here, so that's really nice. It has a look ahead option right here as far as our oversampling, which is great for dynamic changes, great for transients. We also have something that allows you to look out for the transients a little bit more. These do take a little bit more CPU when you start to get a little bit more aggressive with these. And then too, we also see right here, this is something to pay attention to. On most limiters, this is called the ceiling, but on this particular limiter, it's actually called the output. So we still have the ability to add that in there. Our gain knob is what's going to make things louder. And then we also have the ability to oversample right here. Like I said, it's great for dynamic range. Limiting and oversampling go hand in hand. And then we also have our option to add some type of dithering. Usually just go with the bit depth of the session when you're adding dithering right there. And it gives you different options for different types of dithering, whether you want basic, optimized, or weighted. So it's just an overall very well-rounded limiter right here. And there's also ability to change the size of it if you want it to be different right here. It's great to be able to have those different types of sizes, be able to change things. And then I'll just give you a little bit of a sound of how this one sounds.
Summertime is gone, it's gone.
It's the realest.
Slow up your roll, keep it in neutral. I know you're ready, but it ain't mutual. You know the.
You can see too, as we're going up, the Lufs are going up as well, and kind of hit near where it was for streaming right here. There's a couple different options too for your Lufs meter. Integrated is the overall average amount of Lufs that's going on for the entire play of the song. We have short term, which shows you the Lufs within the last 3 seconds. And then we have momentarily, which shows you instantly what the Lufs are. We can see that one changes a lot more frequently, and that one's a little bit harder to pay attention to and really get where you're at. So I usually monitor between short term and integrated just to be able to get a good feel. All right, and no surprise here that my #1 spot is Ozone by Isotope. This thing is one badass piece of software when it comes to mastering. It has just about everything that you need, and it's really easy to get going. As soon as you open up the Ozone Advanced Mastering plugin here, you can start loading things up, and you see that you can add several things in there, all different types of things too. You see that we have EQs, we have tape simulators, exciters, we have dynamic EQ, we have limiters, maximizers, stereo imagers. So I really like this. I'll just show you a couple of the little options that it's got going for each one here. So one of the things I really like is the exciter, and I like that you can do mid-side when it comes to your exciter. And you see too, I can switch things here. So when I switch to side, the type of distortion is different too. I can even move the amount of distortion on the mid, and you see it won't affect the side. So it's really nice to be able to have that, because maybe for the low end, I'm going to want to have a little bit of some analog saturation here. And then maybe for the sides, I want to excite the high end a little bit here. So you can hear too, just with a quick little thing like that, how I'm able to make it seem wider and get the bass to be a little bit heavier too. It's also nice too that I can apply oversampling on the exciter, so then that's a little bit more true to the transients, and the limiting is a little bit easier when it comes to the dynamics. Another part of this that I'm really liking here is it's got a imager. It's kind of an iconic imager. People are always talking about this one. It's renowned. Just be a little careful. You can run into stereo phasing issues. I can show you an exaggerated form of that. You know, clearly most people aren't going to go that exaggerated, thankfully, but you can hear the phasing problems. So just be careful not trying to make it too wide there. You know, you want to be subtle with it, but it can really help make things a little wider. You can hear too as I'm going in and out of the imager that you can hear that it's getting a little wider there, a little bit clearer up top too. And a really nice thing too when it comes to the imager and the exciter as well, we're allowed to choose the bands here, the frequencies that we're choosing here. So it's really cool to be able to have that. You know, if we're trying to get some more shimmery things that sound wider up top, you see we can just move that right up to like 10K or so. We can move some stuff down here to just target our mid-range a little bit. And then same with the exciter. I forgot to mention that, but it's really nice, you know, if you're trying to just bring some excitement to just the sub frequencies, you can just pull that down a little bit. And then if you're just trying to get the shimmery parts to have a little bit of excitement on the sides up top, you can just move your bands around. So it's a really cool function to be able to move your bands around. It's basically multi-band imager and multi-band exciter, which I think is a really clutch thing to have. To, you know, we got vintage tape, which is really nice because I like that it gives you some controls to be able to control the low and the high end a little differently.
It's the realest.
Slow up your roll, keep it in neutral. I know you're ready, but it ain't mutual. You know the reasons, Be better if we just keep it to fucking. I say keep it to nothing. Yeah, slow up your.
Yeah, so I did a little exaggeration on there, but you can hear as I'm going in and out there that it does make a difference. There's also a maximizer in here, which is really nice to be able to get things a little bit more punchy and louder and just kind of maximize what you got there. You got the ability to be a little bit more gentle on the transients and the sustained notes as well. Then we're seeing other things too. We got a vintage EQ in there. We got just a regular post EQ, which is really nice. And what's cool about the EQs in here is we have the option to do our low latency, or we can do our linear phase right here, which is a little bit easier on the transients, as I've mentioned in other videos before. It's really important to be able to have that option to have linear phase, and you can control the amount of your linear phase. You know, when you're down to 0, we're at complete linear phase, and then when we go up to 100, we're at minimum phase. So usually when you're mastering, you want to stick to as close to 0 as you can, because like I said, the linear phase will be a lot more true and softer on your transients and just give you an overall better sounding master. When you're mixing, you want to use low latency rather than linear phase, because if you have too many linear phase plugins going on your computer, you're going to run into CPU issues. But yeah, so it's nice here that we have the EQ. I do wish there was more than 8 bands, but I guess if you're mastering, you probably don't need to use more than 8 bands. But for me, what I usually do is I do a little boosting here with Ozone, and then what I do as far as cutting, I'll go back to Fabfilter Pro-Q 3, and I'll use that as my dynamic EQ and my cutting EQ. There is a dynamic EQ in this plugin, actually. It's not my favorite dynamic EQ. I do like the Sonex Oxford one better, the Hoffa dynamic EQ, and what Fabfilter Pro-Q 3 just did with their dynamic EQ. I do like all those better. One of the things I wish that I could do, I wish that I could zero frequencies a little bit better as far as when I'm dealing this. I also don't like the visual effect that we're seeing here when it comes to their EQ, but nonetheless, it is your one-stop shop for mastering, so it is nice that you have a dynamic EQ. The dynamic EQ is limited to 6 bands, and again, that's something that I wish that it had a little bit more, but it still stays in my #1 spot as far as mastering plugins go. We also have other things too, like we can add on compression, which is nice to be able to have some type of bus compression in there. You see we have everything that we need for a true bus compression. We have our ratio, attack, and release times. You can see too, they're not notched here. We can get as precise as we really need to to. Same with the threshold, it's not notched. And then too, we have other things too, like being able to control the dynamics here, basically a multi-band compressor here. Again, really nice to be able to have that. I always use multi-band compression. I use the Fabfilter multi-band compression. I kind of mix some of my favorite things of Ozone with some of my favorite things of Fabfilter and UAD, but nonetheless, again, your one-stop shop in here. And two, if you need a Lufs meter, it's in here. You just come up to the IO, but you have your integrated, which is you saw when I was breaking down the Pro L2. It's your overall, and then we have things like momentarily and short term. So it's nice to be able to have your ability to track your Lufs. And then we also have the ability to apply dither here, and we can apply different amounts of dither once we engage this on. As I've mentioned in the Pro L part of this video, it is nice to be able to apply dither. It can help with your noise floor. It can help with kind of moving in between your sampling as well. So this is a really powerful plugin. The only thing that I don't like about this plugin, and it's funny because it's the thing that everybody seems to love about this plugin, and it's the mastering assistant right here. I don't like it for two reasons. I think one, it discourages people from learning how to master. I think it puts a lot of opportunities out there for people who should not be mastering at all to claim that they can master. And my third point of why I'm not a big fan of the mastering assistant is that it usually, if you just throw it on there and you don't adjust anything, you start to get stuff that sounds like it's clipping, things that sound like it's giving you those harsh artifacts where you get all that crackling and those weird high end like hissing sounds and that really harsh sound that comes when you go a little too far as loudness goes. And I know that the argument could be you throw on the mastering assistant and then you go and then you make all the changes, but my problem with that I've always found is I pretty much have to delete everything that the mastering assistant did and then go back and make my own changes to it. But I will show you how this works. So you can see, you can choose what you're going for. Streaming, it's going to be a little quieter. CD, it's going to be a little bit higher. And then reference will allow you to, select different tracks. So let's just go with CD because it's going to be the loudest, and we'll go with our intensity is high. So you got to play the audio.
It's the realest.
Slow up your roll, keep it in neutral. I know you're ready, but it ain't mutual. You know the reasons, Be better if we just keep it to fucking. I say keep it to nothing. Yeah, slow up your roll or I might just bounce. You got the.
So hopefully your ears are trained enough that you could hear, once we started to analyze it, you could hear all the crackling that was going on, all the harshness that was going on. Yes, it did make it louder, but it did also make the quality worse. And then for me, the reason why I'm not a fan of it is I got to go back and change things. Like this is something that I would never do. I would never boost that there. I would never boost this there. I wouldn't cut all of this down there as far as some of the drastic cuts that were going on here. And then with the limiting, I definitely wouldn't go this loud right here. That is a little intense. I'd probably ease up on the transients. So I find myself when the mastering assistant is applied, I have to either go in and make a bunch of changes, get rid of a lot of things, or what I usually do with the mastering assistant is I do this. So I get rid of all that right there. But we'll go in and out and show you the difference here. All right, and one of the last things I'll point out here is it has this really awesome ability to do references on here, and it allows you to go in and out. So you can choose like a famous song, load it up, and then you can try to match things as far as quality. One of the big things people try to do is volume. Normally the track that I choose is Tell Me You Love Me by Demi Lovato because it was one of the louder tracks that came out last year. For the purposes of this video, though, I am not going to use that song. song, I will use a different song that I don't have to worry about it being taken down or running into copyright issues for the sake of this video. So we throw in something like this right here. It's going to load up. And it's really cool because it's going to give you options too once it's done loading here for us to choose different parts of the song, and we can shorten that up. We can move this around if we want and choose different sections. So it's nice to be able to do that, and you can go in and out. So let's check this out. We're going to hear the song that we're working on right now, and then I'm going to enable our reference, and then we can see the difference here.
I am the who's who, give me a second, I'm giving direction. Not for out with the old, in with the new, out with the old.
It's the realest.
Slow up your roll, keep it in, cash out, cash out, cash out, cash out, cash out, cash out. You know the reasons, be better if we just.
So you can hear we're pretty close with volume. I mean, there might be a few little things that we need to do to maybe turn it up a little bit, but it's nice to be able to go back and forth and have this ability to A/B references. I think that's something that's really nice. And then just one last thing that I really like about this plugin here is when you have things going in, you can take things out if you want to hear what it sounds like without them, and you can also move things around if you decide later that for whatever reason that you actually want to have your EQ before the vintage tape. It's really easy just to move things around. I love that everything's just right inside of this plugin. It's awesome. So yeah, there's just a couple things about Ozone that I'm not the biggest fan of, but I mean, there are quite a bit of things about Ozone to love, a lot of options to be able to really get the most out of what you're trying to get with mastering. I think it's the most stocked up as far as mastering plugins go. You won't find anything that has more options built right into it. It has pretty much everything that you need, and like I said, the problems that I have with it, they're very few, and I've found personal ways to correct it. I just throw on a different plugin to get that stuff going for me that I'm trying to get anyways. So anyways, yeah, hopefully you got a lot out of this video. Hopefully you got a little bit more. Let me know if there is any of these plugins you want to know more about. Let me know in the comments section below, and I can do a full review on it. I know I didn't get everything about every single plugin because that would make this video a couple hours long, especially Ozone. We cracked into maybe 5 or 10% of it. It can do so much more than that, but I just wanted to give you a reason of why it hit my #1. So again, let me know in the comments section below. So I'm hoping that you got a lot out of this tutorial today. Hopefully there's some information that was useful. If you're getting a lot out of this but you want to see more, please feel free to comment below. Let us know what kind of tutorials that you want to see in the future, and Oracle and I can definitely make that happen. We're always trying to find the content that you want to see. If you're liking what you're hearing from me, you can find me everywhere on social media at Realistic Productions. You can find me at the web, realisticproductions.net. You can find my man SoundOracle everywhere at SoundOracle. And if you're looking for the best 808s, the best kicks, the best snares with the craziest loops and samples you can find on the internet right now, go to SoundOracle.net. Alright, till next time.